right, guys, welcome back to the vlog. Once again, reporting from outside Hustler Casino. Today we are here to play 2 streams back to back. You're probably wondering how that's going to happen. Well, once in a while, this situation occurs where we have many players who want to play on, let's say, Wednesday any given week, and then not enough players on a Friday. So what we'll do is we'll play Wednesday for the Wednesday night stream, and then we'll also play Wednesday for the Friday night stream, and that'll just be a recording from, a couple days prior, if that makes sense. Before we jump into those, however, I wanted to make a quick announcement, which is it's been a long time since I had a meetup game, and I'm thinking of doing one virtually, like, through phones or laptops or whatever, so more people can play from all over the US. I don't know where I'm gonna have it yet. There's, a lot of options, like a bunch of these. So I'm gonna kind of do my research and see which one I think is the best one. And then next video, I think I'll announce where I'm gonna host this. So if you guys wanna play 1-2 online with me, I'll let you know next video when and where that's gonna happen. So yeah, stay tuned. But for now, let's go play a slightly bigger game here at Hustler Casino Live. All right, guys, here we go. Stream number 1, playing 2550. And we're going to skip to the 2-hour mark before I play an interesting hand. In this one, I've got pocket threes. I raise it up to $400. Henry makes the call, and then Brad 3-bets in the cutoff. It gets to Jeff the cash in this small blind. He's a new player that I haven't met before and seems to be plenty of action. He's got a lot of chips and he's playing many hands. He makes it $5,000 to go now. Back around to me, and since Jeff and I are the only deep stacked players so far at the table, maybe one other, I decide to make the call with pocket threes in position, mainly just thinking this is a good spot if we flop a set and he happens to have an overpair. The only issue with this is Brad now gets to act again behind me, but I don't think Brad is going to shove super often, or even call for that matter, so I toss in the 5K, and Brad luckily does not raise. He just makes the call. So we go 3 ways to a flop of 10-4-3. Bottom set, and of course this is the dream. Jeff continues betting for 8,000. Fingers crossed that he's got an overpair or a hand like ace-10 at minimum. And considering how deep we are, I'm just going to raise right away. I make it $25,000. Brad gets out of the way, and unfortunately Jeff just folds. As you guys can tell, he has king high. You could make an argument for only calling, but my usual train of thought is when you have a big hand and you're super deep, you just have to build the pot, even if sometimes you risk getting folds from random airballs like king high. Most of the time though, it's going to pay off when your opponents have aces and things like that. Moving on to the next hand, long story short, I end up winning a small pot with ace-6 suited against Dr. P, and it's not really worth noting except for the fact we're playing the bounty game, which means if you win 3 hands in a row, everyone at the table owes you 1,000. With the pocket threes hand going first, then that last hand with ace-6 of clubs, we now get dealt 6-5 of spades, and again, if I'm able to somehow win this pot, we have an additional $7,000 to collect from everyone else. For that reason, I straddle to 1,000, and it gets to Brad, who decides the hell with it. He's all in for 22K. Everyone else folds. Back to me, and what do we want to do here with 6-5 suited? It's pretty close, actually. I think if I had a hand like 8-6 suited or 9-6 suited, it starts to become an easier fold, but with such a nice connected hand like this, we can never really be in terrible shape unless he's got something like pocket sixes. But even if he shows me kings, for example, 6-5 suited, we stand a chance. Let's do some math here. We have to call around $22,000 in order to win. The 23 in the middle plus the 7,000 that I'm going to win from everyone else. So that's 30K all in all. Is it worth calling 21,000 to win 30K? I don't know. It's pretty close, and usually when it's close, I tend to gamble, especially on stream. This time is no exception. I make the call after thinking it over for a few minutes. Brad asked to run it twice, and I'm sad to see he turns over ace-4 of spades. So our spades are dominated, but On the other hand, he only has one overcard, which was rather surprising. A 6 or a 5 would get it done. Let's see what happens. The first run out is an immediate letdown. 2 aces right away on the flop. 7 and a jack follow, so at least we don't waste any pairs. The second board, however, brings a 6, and then Brad can't find any improvement on the turn or river. So we end up chopping this one up. But the worst part is, when you're playing the bounty game and you run it twice, usually the top board is the one that determines the outcome of the game. And as you guys can see here, Brad has won the top board, which means that I do not win 3 pots in a row. Disappointing, but you know, it could have been worse. Losing it all to Brad would have been a much more painful outcome. Next, I am in the double straddle for 200 bucks. There's a limp from Henry. Brad also limps. And then Dr. P from the first straddle makes it $1,200. I'm on his left looking down at ace-10 offsuit, and it's already an interesting spot, at least in my opinion, because all 3 options seem to make some sense. If I call here, we might get raised from one of the limpers behind, and even if they only call, ace-10 offsuit doesn't play very well between a bunch of players, you know, monkey in the middle with a hand like this. If I fold, that doesn't seem that terrible since Dr. P is probably not messing around too often in this configuration. And then if I re-raise, I can see some merit there too, because we can potentially get heads up against Dr. P if he doesn't have a premium and have position the rest of the hand. So I weigh my options and decide to just call, which I think is not amazing, but anyway, that's what happened. Henry also calls, as does Brad. So the 4 of us are going to a flop of Queen 10-3 Rainbow. Dr. P bets again, this time $2,000. And what do we want to do here with middle pair and top kicker? Well, I don't really want to fold, but I think a fold is actually acceptable considering that Henry and Brad are left to act. But on that note, they did just limp in pre-flop and then call a raise, so I don't know how often they're going to have a hand stronger than mine. Even though there is a queen out there, I don't see it being too dangerous, and I also think Dr. P is capable of bluffing this flop, even against 3 other guys, with a hand like ace-king or ace-jack, for example. So I hang around for at least one more street, I make the call, and Henry and Brad are out of there. So heads up to a turn card, which is the 7 of diamonds, bringing in a backdoor flush draw. Dr. P thinks for a bit now and checks. I think I like the side of that, but I know he might be checking a queen or even an overpair from time to time in hopes that I bluff and maybe he can check raise, or you know, maybe he can just call me down. So instead of putting in some money, which I wouldn't hate, you know, we might get some protection against overcards, I decide to check it back and see what happens on the river. 8 of diamonds is the last card. Shouldn't change too much. I do have the 10 of diamonds, but given how this one's played out, I don't think it's super relevant. And now Dr. P bets 4,000, which is around half pot, putting me in a kind of weird spot. I do think he might play a queen this way from time to time, say something like king queen or ace queen. He might even have an overpair, like I said, on the turn, and now he wants to go for some value. But I also think he might take a stab here with, you know, those same hands that bet the flop and were bluffing, like ace-king or ace-jack, maybe a hand like king-jack, for example. So we're getting a good price. We have a decent bluff catcher. I make the call. And sure enough, Dr. P says good call and shows me that he missed his straight draw with king-jack. So a good result here. Not the biggest pot ever, but always nice to win these. Now we move to this next one, where once again, I am up for winning the bounty. I've won 2 hands in a row. If I win this next one, again, we can collect some money. The only thing is we've actually doubled it to 2,000 a player now. A lot on the line. Let's see what happens. I straddle for 1,000 once again. It gets to Jeff the Cash, who makes it 5,000. Suited Superman calls on the button. And then I look down at Jack 8 suited. Obviously not going anywhere here, given the price we're getting and how nice my hand is. But do we have any other options besides calling? And I think the answer is yes. A re-raise here, albeit a tough story to sell, is a good option for a couple different reasons. Main one being that Suited Superman just called on the button after Jeff's initial raise. Of course, he might be trapping from time to time, but I think for the most part, that's not going to be a super strong hand. And Jeff is just a guy who plays pretty wide. Exhibit A right here, he's made it $5,000 with 9-5 of hearts. I mean, It's not every day you see a guy raising to the price of a used Honda Civic with 9-5. So for those two reasons, I like squeezing here with Jack 8 suited. If we face another raise, we can easily get away from it since my hand's not that amazing. And of course, if we get folds, not only do we collect this $10,000 dead, but the 2K bounty from everyone. So not the most fun spot. It's a little scary because it's going to have to be a big raise, but I decide to go for it. I bump it up to $32,000, which in my head was just the number I would use if I had a big pocket pair. I'm happy to see Jeff fold pretty much right away, but now Suited Superman goes into the tank, and I don't blame him. On one hand, he's got this Queen Jack suited, which is very nice. It plays well post flop, etc. But on the other, I've raised to quite a big size. This is over a third of his stack if he were to call, so he's not going to have that much playability post flop. And he could easily just be behind a random ace high that I might be raising with. Granted, I could also have a bunch of premiums. You know, it's questionable how often since I am on my third button, but it's not impossible. So even though he hates this spot, he eventually decides to make a disciplined laydown, which of course is great news for us because we take it down pre-flop and win the bounty game. Not bad at all. Unfortunately, nothing too interesting happened for the duration of this stream, but stay tuned because we have the bigger game coming right up. All right, just wrapping up the first stream, which is airing live right now for people. We're gonna take like a 15-minute break and get back in there, but as you guys saw, it wasn't the most eventful stream for me. Luckily, I did come out ahead though. I think I was up somewhere around $25,000, if I'm not mistaken, which of course is completely fine with me, especially considering that the game was a little bit wild at times. But yeah, I think most of the blood is yet to come in the following stream. Now, whether that will be my blood or some of the other guys remains to be seen. But yeah, I'm gonna enjoy like 10 minutes of peace and quiet, get back in there and chat with you guys after. So stay tuned. All right, here we go. Playing 100, 200 now. We reshuffle for seats, and spoiler alert, this game is going to get a lot bigger. $400 straddle will become mandatory very soon, and even some occasional rounds of $800 straddles. Big game here on Hustler Casino Live. In the first interesting one, I raise it up with pocket twos, and then Jay, another player I haven't met before, young kid from New York, he bumps it up on my left to 2,200. He's on the button, and he started the hand with around $20,000 or $25,000, maybe just a little less. When it gets back around to me, I say the hell with it. If he's got a bigger pair, so be it, but he could very easily just have two overcards which might fold, and even if they don't, we're just flipping maybe slight favorites against. So I jam all in. Jay is not someone that I want to shy away from. He seems like he's down with the action, and sure enough, he is, as he snap calls with ace queen. So it's a flip for a little under 50K to start the session. We decide to run it twice. First board brings no help as he makes a pair and then ends up rivering a straight. But the second board looks a little friendlier with Jack 9-9 on the flop, 6 on the turn, and a clean river. No disaster to be had. We each win $400 as we chop this one up. In the next hand, I raise it up to $600 with ace jack of diamonds. Airball calls on the button, and then Henry defends the big blind with jack 3 offsuit for absolutely no reason. 3 ways to a flop of ace 10-8 with 1 diamond out there. Top pair, a few backdoor draws. But being 3 ways, I think it's okay to check this hand once in a while. Not every time. This time I do decide to lay in the weeds a little bit and check it after Henry checks. And now Airball takes a stab. He puts in $1,200. Henry is out of there, but of course I am going nowhere. Could even check raise once in a blue moon, but it's a little too fancy in this exact spot. So I decide to call, and we go to a nice turn card. It's the 7 of diamonds, giving me a straight draw and, of course, the nut flush draw. I check it again, expecting Airball to bet for the most part, but instead he checks it back. And then we get some very good news on the river. It's the 4 of diamonds, giving me the nuts in a pretty disguised spot. The pot is pretty small, so how do we get as many chips in there as possible? And I think putting in around a half pot bet might get the job done, because I expect he might call with a worse pair, and it might induce him to raise as a bluff, since my bet's not too big. It looks like that's exactly what's going to happen, because after I bet 2,300, Airball bumps it all the way up to 13,000. Whoa, I did not expect such a big sizing. Obviously, I have the best possible hand, so we are going to raise again. The question is, do we want to min raise? Do we want to shove all in? And in all honesty, I don't think it matters too much, because we're probably just getting snap called if he's got it, and we're probably getting folds if he's bluffing. So eventually I settle on a size of somewhere around 40K or whatever, but again, Airball just snap folds. He's got king high, and yeah, we win this one. A few rounds later, this crazy hand goes down where Jay makes it 600, Airball 3-bets on the button, and then Henry cold calls in the small blind. I then look down at ace queen suited, an absolute premium in this spot. Airball is raising all sorts of trash hands. Henry cold calling is really not too concerning. And Jay making it 600 behind me could be literally any two cards in the universe. So I'm happy to bump it up. I make it 7,500 to go. Jay and Airball quickly get out of there, which does not surprise me. But now it gets back around to Henry, who thinks for a while before not folding and also not calling. Instead, he goes for a very interesting back raise after cold calling from the small blind. Now, of course, you guys can see his cards, so it looks like a genius play that makes sense. And I wouldn't blame your line of thinking, but in the moment, given game flow and this dynamic that I've developed with Henry over the past few months, where he's always complaining about losing pots to me, I felt like Henry was finally taking a stand after getting re-raised from me for like the 100th time this month. And of course I'm wrong. He's actually got it, and I leveled myself into thinking that he was trying to take a stand or pull a move or whatever. So I shoved all in with ace queen suited. I figured we had the best hand, maybe even flipping against small pairs sometimes. And I walked directly into this trap. He snap calls with pocket kings. Even so, it's not the worst thing ever. We have 33%, which is a ton. We run it twice in this $210,000 pot. First one comes queen high, which is the start of a potential bailout, but then no more help arrives on the turn or river. Second board's going to come king high, so we really just need a 10 to make a straight, and that also doesn't get it done. So a little bit unfortunate to run it twice and not find help on either board, but I guess that's life. Sometimes it goes that way, and kudos to Henry for just calling earlier with kings in the small blind. I definitely did not expect him to do that, so a nice pot goes to him, and we lose a big chunk here. In the next one, Jeff makes it 500 to go. I look down at king queen suited after adding on 50,000 or 100,000 post Henry donation, and I make it 2,000 to go on the button. Back around to Jeff, who makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop of queen 8-4 with no clubs, but it's still top pair, great kicker, so when he checks, I bet another 2K. He makes the call, and we see an interesting turn card. It's the 6 of diamonds. Some straights get there, 7-5 I guess only, but also some 2-pair, some potential pocket sixes, and let's face it, Jeff could easily just have a ton of different straight draws like jack 9, jack 10, whatever. So instead of betting here and facing what could be a concerning check raise, I decide to check it back and see if he wants to bluff the river. It's the 3 of clubs, and sure enough, Jeff now leads out for an overbet, $10,000 into the pot. Well, after I've played my hand the way I've played it, can't go anywhere. I make the call, and I'm kind of surprised to see his hand. He's got second pair, so I'm actually not entirely sure whether this was a bluff. I think it's actually just a value bet that uses a big sizing, maybe trying to get looked up by ace high or like pocket sevens. But either way, we win this one, which is, you know, a nice start to recovery after that ace queen disaster. And with that, we begin to arrive at the main act for today's video. Hands from this point forward are really going to start flying off the rails, so just try to bear with me. Here we go. In this one, Jay has 2 buttons on my left. That means if he wins one more hand, he collects this bounty. For that reason, I decide to limp in on the button with 10-9 suited, expecting him to raise pretty often. And raise he does. $10,000. That's right, $10,000. Well, that's a bunch of money, but I've got position and we are super deep. As you guys can see, Jay and I combined for over $500,000. So if we have position and we can make some sort of hand, I like my chances. I make the call. We also have to play some defense for the table, by the way. If he wins this hand, then he gets a bunch of money from all of us. We can't have that. I make the call and we go to a board of queen 6-5, no hearts. So we absolutely miss, of course. And Jay now bets $15,000. Now, obviously, folding here is completely fine. In fact, it's probably just the best play in theory. But that said, Jay has been very, very active tonight, c-betting almost every single flop. And usually when players are doing that, it just means that they're betting way too many hands and they're just going to be pretty weak when they face aggression. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. Sometimes he's going to have ace queen or even better. But I think a raise here is a nice play because, as you guys can see, he could just have random air as he does here, 9-8 offsuit. We actually have the best hand, which is hilarious. But I decided to raise it up in hopes of just getting folds from ace highs, king highs, jack high. You guys get the point. $38,000 to go. It's not going to take a huge raise to get this done. And if he does have a strong hand, I don't want to bloat the pot too much. Now, it's worth noting this is not necessarily GTO approved or anything like that. This is a bit more street. I just thought the guy was weak, so I raised it up, alright? Jay, however, is not convinced just yet as he makes the call, so now I'm like, okay, maybe my reads were wrong. I guess he does have something. Turn card somewhat bails me out, though. It's the 10 of diamonds, so now we do beat some random ace highs that might have floated the flop. Let's say a hand like ace 4 of diamonds or ace king, which is just 2 overs. Now we have a pair, so being that we might now have the winning hand, I decide to check it back this time and evaluate on the river, which is not the worst card ever. It's the 7 of hearts. Shouldn't really change anything. I mean, some straights get there, like 8-9 and 4-3 suited, but I mean, how likely are those hands, right? Especially given that he made it 10,000 pre-flop. Obviously, as you guys can see, my man has the nuts here with 9-8, but of course I did not expect that, especially since I have a 9 in my hand. So when he shoves all in for a ridiculous amount, $262,000 into 100, this definitely piques my curiosity. With a single pair of 10s, calling here would just be ridiculous, but I just felt like Jay was the type of player to try to get one over on me. And yeah, he's definitely not afraid to try to steal pots when he senses weakness. From his shoes, I also understand a bluff because after I raise the flop and then check back the turn, my hand is pretty face up as not being super strong. So that kind of opens the door for him to try bluffing the river, which leaves me in a guessing game. Is he bluffing or is he betting a strong hand trying to make it look like a bluff? It's not fun when you're in these situations playing poker for so much money. Maybe in a 5-10 game or whatever, these spots are interesting and, you know, kind of entertaining, but when it's for this much money, it's a little bit stressful. I try to shake off all that and just think about the hand, though. What story is he telling here, and what hand bets this big for value? Also, isn't he a little afraid that somehow I connected with this card? I mean, what if I had like 6-7 of clubs, or what if I had 8-9 myself? What if I had 10-7 suited, you know? Unlikely, but possible. Why is he not concerned about that? Anyway, I know I'm rambling on, but I'm trying to give you guys the real-time thoughts that I was having in this moment. In the end, though, I just thought to myself, look, if you're bluffing me for $250,000, you deserve it, man. But calling here with just a 10 would be just a little too insane, so I decided to let this one go. And luckily, that was the right decision as Jay turns over the 9-8. Kind of sucks because we still lost a bunch of money in the hand, and of course now we have to pay some extra money since he wins the bounty game, but of course we do avoid paying an additional $260,000, which I am not complaining about whatsoever. Sadly, we are now stuck a bunch of money, but the night goes on and the game is good, so I add on for some more chips and we continue. In this one, I look down at pocket 7s. There's a raise to 500 from Jeff. I call on the button, and then Jay re-raises again from the small blind. He makes it $4,000. Jeff makes the call, and of course I also make the call on the button with a pocket pair. This one pretty straightforward so far. Board comes down Queen Jack 6, which obviously doesn't connect with me, but the nice thing is that Jay checks it, and then Jeff also checks it. So we get a free turn card, which is delicious. The 7 of diamonds, giving me a turn set. Jay checks, Jeff checks again. This is not exactly what we were hoping for. It seems I'll have to do my own betting. I throw in $8,000. Jay makes the call pretty quickly, and then Jeff gets out of there. So we're going to a river card, which is quite nice. The 5 of spades. Aside from 8-9, this doesn't change too much. Jay checks again, and now of course we have to go for some value. The nice thing here is that we can go pretty big because there's so many missed draws and bluffs that I might be taking the same line with. So I settle on a bet around the size of the pot, $25,000 into $28,000. Jay thinks for a little bit and then calls. So we get some money back and win this $78,000 pot with a turn set versus his ace jack. Definitely a step in the right direction. Let's see if we can keep it going with pocket sevens again a few minutes later. This time I raise it to $1,000. It gets all the way to Jeff in the big blind, who bumps it up to $5K. I'm happy to call in position once again with a pocket pair being pretty deep stacked. So we go to a flop of Queen 9-6 with a couple of clubs. I do have the 7 of clubs, but of course we don't hit a set. Jeff continues betting for $4,000, and considering that we have a pair and still beat a lot of hands, I make the call. Turn card is the 3 of diamonds, and now Jeff continues betting, this time $11,000. And even though sevens might still be ahead, we could just have so many better hands to continue with here, so I decide to let these sevens go. And luckily we get to see that Jeff did indeed have it with King Queen. So the pocket sevens not meant to be this time. Moving right along, why don't we upgrade to pocket eights? Here we're playing a round of 100, 200, 400, 800. A bunch of blinds, a bunch of money. It gets to Henry on the button, who makes it $2,400 to go. Like I said, I have pocket eights. I'm on his left in the small blind. He could be raising a plethora of hands on the button, so of course I'm going to come in for a re-raise. Out of position, I make it $10,000 to go. Back around to Henry, who thinks for a bit and decides to just call with ace king. And we see a flop of Jack 9-6 with a couple of hearts. Not the best flop ever for eights, but I think a lot of my hands are going to continue betting here, so I decide to throw in a small wager of $6,500, around a third pot. Henry makes the call with his ace king high, and we see the 3 of diamonds on the turn. Now my hand plays nicely as a check, and then see what Henry wants to do. So that's what I do, and he knuckles it back. So we're going to a river, which is a nice one. It's the 9 of clubs. Question here is, do we want to go for value or check it and see what Henry does? And I think with eights, probably it's better to just check and evaluate. Henry checks it back right away, and we end up winning this one versus ace high, but this pot definitely could have been bigger. All right, so you guys have been served all the appetizers. Here is the main course. This is the hand of the night. This is the hand of the vlog. We are underway with Jay this time having pocket sevens. He raises it up on the button to $3,000. As you guys can tell, the game has just gotten completely off the rails with the blinds and the pre-flop sizings. Sometimes games just do this. They just, get huge, and you just hang on and hope that you survive the ride. So anyway, Jeff now makes it $10,000 from the big blind, and I look down in the final straddle at ace queen offsuit. We're playing short-handed at this point. Ace queen offsuit in position to the 3-better is a very good hand. Obviously not amazing, but it's pretty damn good. So I decide to bump it up to $30,000. And this is where the hand starts to get a little weird, as Jay calls the 4-bet on the button. He's on my left, and then Jeff folds. So not exactly what I was anticipating. I thought Jay would fold and then Jeff might call, but instead we get the inverse. That's fine. Jay probably doesn't have the strongest hand ever after just calling my 4-bet, so we're off to a board, which is beautiful for my exact hand. Queen 6-4 with 2 clubs out there. We have top pair, top kicker, which almost always will be the nuts in a 4-bet pot, and especially so when the other 2 cards are so low. Granted, there are some draws available, but you got to remember, I made it $30,000 pre-flop, so questionable how often he's going to have flush draws or straight draws. Anyway, I decide to continue betting. Would do this with all my hands, of course. I put in $20K. And now Jay decides to raise, which I definitely did not expect. I thought he would either fold or call, but here we go. He makes it 50,000. A pretty small raise relative to the pot, and I'm not really sure what this is about. Usually my MO when I face unorthodox plays from my opponents is to just play my hand in the most logical, straightforward way I can think of and try not overthinking it. So I've got top pair, top kicker. Granted, he did raise to 50K, but it is still a straightforward spot. I make the call and we go to a turn card, which might be amazing. It might be a disaster. Who knows? It's the Queen of Diamonds. Of course, we now have trips. If he has a queen himself, this is the money card. If he has pocket sixes or pocket fours, we are absolutely cooked. And I can just kiss my remaining 300K goodbye. I check it again, seeing what Jay wants to do. And he assembles yet another bet. This time to the tune of $80,000, around half pot. What is going on here? Once again, I think the most obvious play here is to just call and check again on the river. If he's got a queen, he's going to continue betting it. And if he's got a draw of some sort, he might bluff. However, I think it over for a little bit and start wondering to myself, might it be a better play to actually raise with such a strong hand? And the reason I think that is Jay is not going to think that I have a good hand if I do this, or at least I wouldn't, because how does it make any sense to raise with ace queen? And in doing so, he might level himself into hero calling with whatever random hand he might be raising with. Let's say he has a hand like 6-5 suited or some sort of pocket pair, whatever. Maybe he just has the nut flush draw, which might be priced into call. I don't know. I start liking that idea more and more as I think about it. And in the end, I decide to go for it for two primary reasons. The first being exactly what I described, which is I think this is going to look like a bunch of BS, and we might get called a little bit light because of that. And the second reason is that if Jay is bluffing, let's say the river breaks out and it's like the deuce of hearts, I don't know if he's got it in him to bluff again. If he has a hand like 7-5 or just some flush draw, whatever, there's not a lot of people on planet Earth who are willing to bluff off in a 700K pot or whatever. And I don't know if Jay's the type, so instead of risking him checking back on the river, let's just get it all in now. I jam all in, and we don't get a snap call. We also don't get a snap fold. And after a few seconds, I realize that we are in a great spot as Jay starts wondering to himself, why would you go all in if you have something? In fact, he starts speaking out loud and he says, you can't have ace queen, you can't have aces, you can't have kings, those hands wouldn't make sense. And it's nice hearing that because that's exactly what I was thinking as I went all in, is this is probably going to make no sense. Sure enough, it seems to have at least confused him for a while, but he hasn't made a decision. In fact, it takes him around 5 minutes to eventually lean one way or another. And the way he leans is in making the call, keeping me honest, saying that maybe I have ace king or something. Unfortunately for Jay, this time I've actually got it. I turn over the ace queen, and he asked to run it twice, which of course I'm completely fine with, especially in a pot this big. I'm kind of happy to run it twice myself, honestly. $738,000, guys. I think this is either the biggest or second biggest pot I've played in my entire life. In fact, I know it's one or the other. I just don't remember how big the aces versus kings hand was a few years ago, but it's pretty close. Either way, we are once more in very good shape to scoop a giant pot. First river is clean. We just need to dodge a 7 on the other river, and we do. It's a 9. And just like that, guys, we win the biggest pot I've played in over a year. And I think one of the biggest pots that Hustler has seen all year, aside from the $1 million games, of course. Ecstatic with this result, especially after being stuck like $150,000 just a few hours earlier. Very exciting hand, and we still have a few more before we close out the stream. All right, in this next one, I raise it up on the button with ace 5 offsuit. Not the best hand, but we are on the button in an unopened pot, so pretty standard. Airball makes the call, as does Henry, once again with jack 3 offsuit in the final blind. Three ways to a flop of queen, queen, 7 with 2 hearts. Airball checks, Henry checks, and I decide to check this one back. I wouldn't hate betting, actually. I think it might have been a better play. But anyway, we go to a turn, which is the 6 of hearts. I do have the 5 of hearts, but not much else aside from that. And now airball bets 3,500 bucks. Henry gets out of there, and for whatever reason, I was catching vibes that airball had a weak hand. And ace high does beat a lot of weak hands, like straight draws or random flush draws, who knows. So I make the call. We also have some outs if we hit an ace or potentially a heart, but none of those come. Instead, it's the 4 of clubs. And now airball bets around the size of the pot, maybe a little less, $10,000. Back to me now with ace 5, and I don't know, I thought for some reason airball was bluffing or betting some sort of weak holding. So after a few seconds of thought, I decide to keep him honest with ace high, thinking that we're beating straight draws and such. And then he flips over pocket 3s. So we lose to that hand. Nice pot to airball. And with that, we arrive at the final interesting hand of this session, which also I thought was a pretty cool one. I look down, finally, at the best possible hand. It's been a while. Pocket aces. Not just that, there is a limp and a raise ahead of me. That is good stuff. Jeff calls on the button for 400. Henry makes it 3,000, and of course I am going to make it more. I make it 13K. Back around to Jeff now, who limped in on the button, and he decides to back raise. $33,000 to go. Well, that's about as sweet as it gets when you have aces. Some guy making it 33K, and he's got 200 plus left behind. Obviously, raising here is completely okay, especially out of position. But after having played with Jeff for about 10 hours at this point, I've seen him be pretty active pre-flop, and I just had the feeling that he was bluffing. It also helps to know that I have 2 of the aces, so we have even more removal to strong hands like ace-king or whatever. So instead of putting in a 5-bet and potentially folding out whatever random junk he might have, I decide to get sneaky and just call. Which of course, as we can see the cards, is kind of a perfect play because he has jack-9 offsuit. Obviously, if he has kings or queens, this is a disaster, so being a little results-oriented here. But anyway, we go to a board which, puts any sort of concerns to rest. It's ace-jack-3. And even though top set is always fun, I kind of don't like it because, again, if he has some sort of pocket pair, we're not going to get much more action. I check, he bets 12,000, and I make the call. Nothing else to do here. Turn card is the 8 of diamonds. I check it again, and this time Jeff checks it back. And we see the queen of clubs on the river, which technically means I no longer have the nuts. King 10 would now be the winning hand, which is kind of funny because that's what Henry had. But anyways, you guys can see a little bit of frustration on his face here. Anyway, I think a bet is in order here. If we get raised, that's completely fine. I'll just call. If he had king 10, he probably would have continued betting the turn anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. I throw in a bet of around a 3rd pot, which is, I think, the best sizing here. But Jeff lets it go right away, not interested in calling with his pair of jacks, and we win this one with just aces. That's all, pocket aces. Not just that, by the way, but 3-button alert. I forgot to mention, that was the 3rd hand in a row that I had won. So we also get 2K from everyone. And we move to this very last shuffle because at this point we had added another rule, which is if you win 4 hands in a row, you get $5,000 from each player. So 2K for 3 hands, 5K for 4 hands. Pretty sweet side game. I highly recommend you guys try this one out at your local tables. But anyway, there's a limp from Henry on the button, and I just make it $10,000 to go from the small blind. I've got ace-10 of spades. It's a very nice hand, and of course, we have those bounties to collect if we get some folds. Sure enough, Henry gets out of there, and we win 5K from airball, from Jeff, and from Henry. So another 15K for the road. That was the last hand of the stream, and we could not have ended on a sweeter note. As always, I hope you all enjoyed. Stay tuned for some final thoughts. Well, here we are again after a ridiculous session at Hustler Casino Live. It was a little slow at first, then I lost a bunch and I was stuck like $150,000 or so. I don't even know how much I was down at the worst point, but needless to say, things definitely turned around.
And it feels like I've been saying this all year long, but I truly feel that this was the craziest session so far. And again, that seems to be a repeated statement across my vlogs in the past 3 to 4 months, but I mean, you guys are seeing the hands. It's just getting more and more ridiculous. On that note, let's talk about some results. The first stream I won, well, I already touched on that earlier. You guys will see that here, but the second stream, I won, I think, 260,000 or so. I'm not entirely sure. My chips are back here and I haven't counted them yet, but it was a ton of money and one of my biggest wins ever. Definitely one of my biggest wins this year. Here's to hoping that the next 6 months are anything like what this year has been so far. So that's all I got, guys. As always, thanks for watching. If you gave this video a thumbs up, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Peace.